The billionaire lifted the spoon to his lips, annoyed and impatient when a dirty, trembling hand slapped it away. The entire restaurant froze. Gasps echoed. Security jumped forward, but the beggar girl didn't run. She stared at him with terror in her eyes and screamed, "Don't eat that." If he hadn't looked down at the plate right then, he would have been dead in less than 5 minutes. They say destiny whispers before it screams. But that afternoon, destiny shouted through the voice of a starving child no one wanted to see. Alexander Graves was a man who controlled cities with signatures and destroyed rivals with silence. Billionaire, investor, philanthropist for cameras, predator in boardrooms. He sat alone in the private section of the most expensive restaurant in the city, glass walls separating him from the outside world like a god behind invisible armor. Outside those walls, people begged. Inside, people bowed. The beggar girl had been standing there for hours. No one knew her name. No one asked. She was thin, wrapped in torn clothes 3 sizes too big, her hair knotted by neglect and dust. Most people looked through her, not at her. Some tossed coins without eye contact. Others complained to management. Alexander noticed her only because she wouldn't leave. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't crying. She was watching him. Security approached her twice. She backed away but returned each time, eyes locked on the billionaire's table. There was fear there, urgency, something wild and desperate. When Alexander's food arrived, a rare imported dish worth more than most people's monthly rent, he finally looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. That was when she ran. She burst through the door before anyone could react, before logic could interfere, before permission existed. Her small hand struck the spoon just as it reached his mouth. "Eat that," she screamed, voice cracking like glass. The restaurant erupted, chairs scraped, security lunged, someone shouted to call the police. Alexander stood slowly, rage flashing across his face. No one had touched him like that in decades. "Get her out," he said coldly. But then he saw it, a thin, oily shimmer on the food's surface. A smell barely noticeable, sharp and bitter beneath the rich aroma. His instincts, honed by years of survival at the top, flared. "Stop," he said. Security froze. Alexander gestured for the chef. The spoon was tested. The plate was taken. The room waited. 5 minutes later, the chef collapsed, poison. A rare one, fast, almost untraceable. The restaurant emptied in chaos. Police arrived. Questions flew. But Alexander only watched the girl, who now sat on the floor, shaking violently as if the weight of what she had done was finally crushing her. He asked, kneeling in front of her, her lips trembled. "Because they paid me to watch," she whispered, "and I saw them switch the plate." Silence swallowed the room. They hadn't paid her to warn him. They had paid her because they thought no one would notice a beggar girl watching. Alexander had escaped death not because of power, wealth, or influence, but because someone the world ignored chose to speak. And that was only the beginning. The girl thought saving a billionaire would finally make her invisible life worth something. She had no idea it would make her a target. Her name was Leela. Alexander learned that as she sat across from him in a hospital room, wrapped in clean clothes for the first time in years. Doctors said she was malnourished, exhausted, and carrying scars no child should have. He offered her money, a home, protection. She shook her head. "They'll come," she said quietly. "They always do." Alexander didn't understand at first. He thought enemies were men in suits, not shadows that hunted children. But that night someone tried to silence her. Security stopped them just in time. That was when Alexander realized the truth. The same world that tried to kill him had already destroyed her. Leela had grown up in alleys and shelters, learning early that survival meant watching everything and trusting nothing. She had seen bribes exchanged, deals whispered, violence hidden behind smiles. No one noticed her, and that made her dangerous to the wrong people. Alexander moved her into his estate under strict secrecy. The media spun stories, rumors spread. But something inside him had changed. For the first time, his wealth felt heavy. As days turned into weeks, Alexander listened to her stories, to her fears, to her sharp observations about a world he thought he understood. She didn't see him as a billionaire. She saw him as another man who almost didn't listen. When the investigation uncovered the traitor within Alexander's own company, the betrayal cut deep. A trusted partner had ordered the poisoning to seize control. Power had made Alexander arrogant, untouchable. Leela had made him human again. He dismantled the corrupt empire piece by piece, not quietly, not mercilessly, but deliberately. And then he did something no one expected. He stepped down. He created foundations not for tax breaks or headlines, but for children like Leela, for the invisible ones. He funded shelters, education programs, and legal protection for those society ignored. Leela stood beside him at the opening of the first center, her hair brushed, her eyes still cautious but hopeful. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Alexander smiled sadly. "Because I had everything and still almost lost my life. You had nothing and still saved mine." The world applauded him, but the real victory was quieter. Years later, Leela would stand on a stage as a lawyer defending children no one believed. Alexander would sit in the audience, just another man clapping with tears in his eyes, and the message would echo louder than any speech. Never ignore a voice just because it comes from the shadows. Sometimes, the ones with nothing see the truth the clearest. And sometimes, listening can save more than one life.